I want to introduce Jon Linn, who's our career development educator out of the CSU Career Center, who's agreed to meet with us and kind of talk about that. And we're going to tie those things together. So, with that, John, I'm going to mute my microphone and ask all of you to mute yours until you have a question or you want to ask in the chat. And I will now turn it over to Jon Linn. Thanks, John, for coming.
Thanks, Dr. V. Good morning, everyone. I am a career educator at the Career Center on campus at CSU. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I've been at the Career Center for about 7 years, and I probably don't need to give you too much of my background. I think maybe a little bit of my background or story will kind of seep into what I talk to you about today. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, or attempt to here. And I'm going to we'll have a PowerPoint. The title of this, what I wanted to get to, one of the main points for me is trying to make this as real as possible. And based on my experience of working with students in the major and career exploration process, based on their own experiences and my own experiences and the experiences of colleagues of mine, people I know, friends, what they've gone through, and try to kind of cut through some of the chatter, or maybe myths about how people really find their place as far as a career, okay? So that's a big goal. I also want to kind of give a disclaimer and say, in no way is what I talk about today meant to be a conclusive procedure or process that you would go through. It's meant to start you out and get you thinking about things that are important. So it's really an impossibility actually to try to, in this amount of time, it's like under an hour, guide someone through the process. So please understand that this is more about big picture concepts and ideas, things to be thinking about. This information will apply to you whether you are an incoming student with no idea what you want to do, someone who's decided, someone who's already been in college for a few years and has a major chosen and has maybe even a career path kind of lined up. There will be pieces of all this that apply to you, and then the other pieces that won't. So again, kind of a disclaimer on that. So let's go ahead and look at, this is just a quick shot of the agenda, what I'm going to be talking about. Probably also a good time to say that traditionally, the idea of career services and career centers on campuses in the US, they've been centered around the idea of white male professionalism. And that's, that's the world in which a lot of the concepts have developed. So I do believe that most of these concepts, there are still ideas that are relevant and universal. And also, I think I do need to point out that traditionally career services is definitely an area that has been dominated by white and by male. So keep that in mind. Also, I will leave some time at the end for some questions. And I will also have my, you could see my email was at the beginning and I can put that back up. But if you want to reach out to me, I'm more than happy to discuss anything with you. All right, so first we're just going to get some terms out of the way. And again, you may all know these already, but you may not. And these are specific to CSU. So I want to kind of have a base of understanding what we're talking about. So majors and minors and concentrations. What are these and what's the difference? So a major is simply your main program of study. Most of you have probably heard of this idea. When you start CSU, you can choose one major, and you could even choose to be undeclared or be an exploring student. You can do that as well. CSU has about 74 majors right now, I believe, according to the admissions office, although the website says there are 70, apparently there's a few more. A minor, there's 100 minors at CSU. You may choose to have a few minors or no minors. A minor is a secondary program of study. My personal philosophy is that oftentimes the minor can be something that you study because it's really fascinating or interesting to you. It may have nothing to do with your major. or it may complement your major. It may add some knowledge to it. And we'll say in the world of work, in the world of careers, minors are not that crucial. Um, they can be if you have gained some great experience and you can convince someone of the experience you've gained through your minor. And usually, I think most employers aren't really concerned with your minor, so it can be leveraged as an employment tool. And my personal philosophy is I like to think of them as kind of interesting add-ons. So what's a concentration? Concentration is a specific area that you would study within a major. So for instance, at CSU, if you're a business administration major, you can choose a concentration, numerous concentrations. You might choose accounting or finance. Technically, your major is business, your concentration would be accounting. So just know that's a way of being more specific within a degree program. So when we go about trying to discover where we should land in the world of majors and careers, I think it's important to understand some concepts before you start. And this will help you feel more comfortable as you go about it. The biggest thing that I want to emphasize would be that know that major and career exploration is a process. And by that, I mean, it can often take a lot of time, much more than I think a lot of people think. It could take years, it could take weeks too, but it typically is something that involves a lot of self reflection on your part, research, decision making, information gathering. All of those pieces go into it. So, usually, when I'm working with an exploring student, it can take several months for them to move through different parts of a process. And know that everyone goes about the exploration process differently. That's very normal. Some people do it very quickly. Some people prefer to make decisions quickly. Other people want to gather as much information as they can before making a decision. So in my experience at CSU, I do think it's most effective when students spend quite a bit of time essentially doing homework um, in major and career exploration before they make a decision. Um, I, I just think that that's probably from what I've seen, those decisions tend to work out better. And I have students that can make this decision in a day if they've been kind of gathering and informally gathering information, maybe even for years. Sometimes they're ready to make that decision when they start college. But for a lot of students, not so much. It's going to take a little more time. So, a good mindset to have when you go about this is think about the exploration process as a chance to be curious about the world, a chance to discover new things, the chance to make mistakes and learn from them. I really think if you view it from that perspective, it's a lot more positive. It's you gain a lot more than thinking of it as like a crushing deadline. You just have to get this decision right the first time. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So this little diagram over at the side of the slide that you can see, this is basically a representation of what career paths can look like. And you'll see on the bottom line, it's a straight line between A and B, maybe the beginning and the end. So career exploration and the process of starting and ending, or not even really ending, but proceeding along the process, it's really not a straight line. It's more of like a convoluted path. So this is simply kind of a metaphor for what career paths really look like. Rarely are they straight line point A to point B. Taken literally, I guess what I'm talking about is rarely does someone's career path go from I chose a major in English to I studied in college and now I'm graduating and working in the field of English, whatever that is. So yes, those direct paths can happen. I guess for some examples, like engineering, which I'm going to use as an example a few more times in this. Engineering is kind of a common program where you would study engineering and you're most likely going to end up as an engineer. If you go to medical school, you're probably going to be a medical professional, a doctor. And for a lot of people, things don't work that simply. It's a convoluted path. So myth or truth number one, my choice of major will determine what careers I pursue for the rest of my life. This one is actually a myth. So the truth is, statistically, and a majority of people who graduate from college do not work in a career directly related to their major. Okay. So like I said, there are exceptions, like engineering would be a major one. Okay. 80% of students change their major at least once. I myself changed my major, I think it was twice. I know some people that have changed it up to 12 times. So that it definitely happens. And another truth is many students who are declared or say they're declared and have made a choice, they oftentimes are in reality unsure of their choice. So they may be what we would call like an undeclared declared student. Just know that um, the direct path from a major to career oftentimes is not as direct as we think. People oftentimes end up working in a field that may only be tangentially or not even at all related to what they studied in college. This is okay. Okay, major myth or truth number two. It's best to declare a major as soon as possible. I would say this is probably a myth. It depends on the person, but statistically, they found that students who declare during semesters 3 to 5 have a better chance of graduating than those who declare right away upon starting college and then never change that major. So at CSU, I believe like a typical 4-year degree, bachelor's degree would be like 8 semesters. So deciding in semesters 3 to 5, somewhere in your second and third year is when you're really making that decision.
Hmm.
Okay, number three, unconscious bias on college campuses can affect which majors you choose. So the answer is truth. And I actually found some evidence in doing some research that um, this was specific to Black and Hispanic students. But basically, in the advising process on campus, so once you choose a major or you're undeclared, you would see an academic advisor who would guide you in choosing classes, et cetera. That process has some implicit or unconscious bias that is inescapable. So I guess to me, if you think about, and I'll show you a slide around this. If you think about, let's say, Asian students, students of Asian background, stereotypically, what do you think? What do you think that they would study in college? And stereotypically, I think a lot of people would say science, technology, engineering, and math careers or majors. So that would be STEM. If you haven't heard that term, it's an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and math, or what we might call practical careers. So the data does actually show that that is students majoring, students graduating from college, 30% of them in STEM majors are of Asian background. So in this case, you know, this is a stereotype that is true somewhat. Asians are attracted to these majors. And so imagine in the advising process, if an advisor um, is thinking this way and thinking people from certain backgrounds, certain identities, certain cultures naturally gravitate to certain majors or careers, an advisor or a faculty member or anyone could definitely be they could unconsciously be steering certain students towards certain majors or careers, and at the same time steering students away from certain careers. Okay. And I'm going to talk about a resource that was a career assessment that was actually developed to kind of try to fight against this trend in a few minutes. Okay, myth 4. If I find out which jobs will be hot in the future, I can pick majors that will lead to them. This is, I would say, a myth. This isn't really true because simply many of the jobs that will exist in the future do not exist at this time. So they're saying 85% of jobs that will be available to you in the year 2030 don't exist yet. And I think this would be a good time to mention that the COVID virus situation has affected the job market in the present. And as of now, we don't know what that's going to look like in the future. So the big point on this myth or truth is really that if you're trying to kind of do a lot of research and guess what's going to be the best paying job in the future, or guess what career field may have the most opportunities, it's really difficult to do that. So there are exceptions. There are organizations that track data and do make predictions based on that. And one of those websites I will give you is a resource in a few minutes. So there is data, there are predictions, and at the same time, I don't really feel like this is the best way to choose a major. Okay, so if I'm telling you what I don't really think is the best way, well, maybe what is a better way? And I want to introduce you to the idea of career competencies. And these are basically skills that any student can be developing during their time getting a bachelor's degree that are actually the skills most sought after by employers. So these aren't technical skills related to a particular job necessarily. They are what we would call more of like universal, multi-applicable skills that no matter what career field you go into, employers will find to be important. So I would encourage you to think of your time spent in college as a great way to develop in these areas. Now, on the next slide, I'm going to give you the actual web address where you can read more about the detail of each of these competencies. But here you're just seeing the titles, and I don't really have time to get into all of them. I might pick some simple ones to explain. Communication is universal. Can you communicate well in multiple situations? Inclusive teamwork. Can you work in groups with people who are not like you, with identities that are different from yours? Can you work in those situations and resolve conflict? Very important. Critical thinking, the ability to look at a problem from many different angles, not just the one that's obvious to you. So these competencies are actually based on, these were something that my office worked up specifically. And I just want you to keep in mind that as a student, look for ways to develop these, because no matter what you study, these will be skills that you can leverage when you're getting a job. Okay, big point here. And this refers to the last slide as well. Oftentimes it's not your major that is important in the world of work, it's what you do with your major. So again, all CSU majors combined with a lot of other resources available to you in college and at any college really are going to help you develop these competencies. I'm showing here the website, the web address for the actual competencies. If you wanted to make note of that, I realize it's long, you could read more about them in detail. And I don't know if the slide deck is going to be available to you later. Hopefully it is. So I wanted to include that resource. Okay. Now, talking about this next part, I'm going to blaze through what is really generally a much deeper, a deeper process and a longer process. I don't want you to think that, again, this happens really quickly, but when you are doing work around career exploration, the following concepts are, I guess I would say these are the typical pieces of major and career exploration. So we'll talk about these concepts, and again, I'm not going to get into them in detail. The hope is that I'm going to show you some resources to help you start getting into these, and know that there's a support system probably no matter where you are, like at what school you're at CSU, maybe within your own social network. There's a support system to help you work on and discover many of these things. So what are the traditional building blocks of career and major exploration? So interests, what you're intrinsically fascinated by, what you're motivated by. Very important in career satisfaction. And your interests change over time. Okay, so it's what you may be interested in when you're 18, when you're 35, they may have changed. Values. So career values, there are a range of career values. I wanted to kind of point out some important values that I think are good to consider or values that affect your career decision. And in the comments, I believe there's a comment where somebody alludes to this. Yes, your family and their values, what's important to them, that is often a major factor in what you are exposed to. Maybe what, parents always kind of have dreams for their children, right? Like, I want my child to be a, fill in the blank. So I would consider that a value, a family value that does affect your decision. Okay, for many people. Your culture, your cultural background. And specifically here, maybe I'll talk briefly about this in a few minutes, but uh, United States is a very individualistic centered culture. We tend to think of decisions, we tend to think we can do anything on our own. We have agency to do what we want. We are independent. And I'd say that's the typical viewpoint in the career major exploration process in the United States. And your culture, if it does not happen to be individualistic, if it's more a community type culture, oftentimes you're going to be making decisions that are based on the good of all rather than the good of one. So uh, I would put those ideas into the idea of values. Other values would be things like geographic location of where you live and work, even within a city or a town, the amount of money you earn, your salary. That's something people have different ideas of what's most important in these areas. Your skills, so being able to take stock of what you're really good at, natural abilities. And I'll couple that with strengths. And I believe tomorrow, Madigan may be getting into this a little bit more than I'm going to get into it. I hope that's the case. But I will say this, what you are naturally inclined to do, what you are intrinsically good at, being able to discover what those things are and then amplify them and use them in your career, that often leads to career satisfaction. I guess this is an idea based in positive psychology. So simply put, instead of trying to focus on improving at something you are not great at, the idea would be to discover what you truly are good at naturally and to build up those skills and interest areas. So I can definitely tell you that my younger years were spent operating kind of from a deficit perspective of something like, for instance, I'm not good enough at math. I need to be much better at math. So I'm going to load up on math classes and study a lot. And it really wasn't me. That's not who I am. I'm not naturally not naturally talented at math. So that was a struggle for me. And really I was just fighting what I knew to be true, which was there are other things I was much better at. And it probably would have been better for me to go in those directions earlier. So keep in mind, in this whole process, the Career Center is a great option to support you through taking stock of your interests, your values, your skills, your strengths. Your advisors also can help you do this, professors or faculty. Really anyone that you may encounter at CSU that you feel comfortable with can often help you get to know yourself better. Again, I'm really glossing over this, but I wanted you to see like the big picture building blocks of exploration. I wanted to show you a screen from the Career Center's website that um, it's our resource center. And you cannot see the very top of the page, but resources is a pull down tab at the top of our website. The Resource Center contains all kinds of information about career exploration. And in this screenshot, I chose to look at assessments. And you can see the very first assessment, it says interest self-assessment. So if you're thinking, how do I really find out what I'm interested in? Like, I think I know, but I want to get some, another perspective to make sure that I really know what I'm interested in. Oftentimes, taking a career assessment like this one can give you that information in a tangible way. So it's not just an abstraction in your head. You can actually look at your results. There are numerous career assessments. This is probably a good time to mention that a career assessment, there are assessments for interests, skills, values, all of the pieces I was talking about. Some of them are really fun. I love taking them just to get a different perspective about myself. Just know that assessments aren't designed to put you in a box or to confine you. They're designed to give you some information and insight you may not have otherwise, but they're not meant to tell you what to do with your life or to direct you towards certain careers and say that you can only do some things and not other ones. I think that's actually a myth that a lot of people think, and it's sometimes easy to get trapped into that idea is that if I just take a test, the answer will be easy. And it'll be all right there before me. I just don't think that's true, and I actually think that's a harmful way to think. And assessments themselves, they were not designed to be that. They're just designed to be points of information. All right, so that's my little disclaimer about assessments. Right here on this screen, I'm actually going to show you some assessments available to you. You may already be familiar with the My Majors quiz because the admissions office uses this. Something that I really like to have students do is to go to the admissions website and look at the list of academic majors and minors, specifically the majors, and take notes just by reading the titles of the majors. What do you think sounds like interesting? What do you think sounds like you? And you may not have much information about them at all. So you're kind of going on gut instinct and initial impressions here. But that's oftentimes a good place to start if you're thinking, I have no idea what majors are available to me or what they're even about. The admissions website does give you a comprehensive list of all of those. And I do believe it also clicks out to areas where you can read more about the majors and minors. Last resource here, I was hoping I would be able to click into this and show it to you. I cannot. Once you're a CSU student, you can access it through the Career Center website. But if you, as a member of the public in general, you cannot see it. It is called, what can I do with this major? That's a typical question a lot of people want to know. So I've spent a lot of time talking about majors can lead to numerous different careers. And with that said, majors, there are obviously connections between majors and certain careers. This website will show you what a lot of those are. So it is called, what can I do with this major? If you are an admitted CSU student, you can access it on the resources page on the Career Center website, which is career.colostate.edu. This next idea, I really think this is important. And honestly, this might be one of the biggest and most effective ways to do major and career exploration is actually taking it out of the area of just self-exploration, self-reflection, taking it into active exploration. So that often looks like a job, a part-time job, an internship, a volunteer experience. You can test things out this way. You can experience what it's actually like to do many different things if you go out and try to do them. So really, there is no substitute for experience. A career assessment might tell you that you would be a good match, with maybe say nursing, but do you really know that? So could you get a job volunteering in a hospital and actually work around nurses? Something like that would give you a lot better idea and expose you to what the career is actually like. As a student at CSU, you also have an option to join literally hundreds of organizations and student clubs. Oftentimes these clubs are, for instance, they are industry oriented, for instance, like pre-med, pre-pharmacy, pre-law. So if you're thinking about a particular career direction, even early on, getting involved with a club is a great way to explore. So there's a missing bullet point here, at the bottom of the first column. I should have had a bullet point before: join a Colorado industry tour. So industry tours are events that the Career Center sponsors. Essentially, we take students by the busload to various employers in Northern Colorado, let you see people at work, let you interact with employees at a company. It's a great time for discovery and making connections with people in fields that you may be interested in. So if you watch the Career Center's website, I actually don't know how we are going to conduct these this fall, given the virus situation. We may be doing them virtually. I just don't actually know how we're going to do these. Typically, we would take you by bus to a location. So stay tuned for those, but you can look at our website and there will be updates on industry tours. So the last area, or the last thing that you could do would be to job shadow a friend or a family member. That's probably the easiest place to start. So if you can watch someone at work and ask them questions and be curious about what they do, you will learn a lot of excellent information that way. I want you to do a little bit of reflection. I know I don't have much time left. We're going to take probably, I'm going to give you 60 seconds to either actually do this and write down your answer. But I really believe a question like this gets you started to think about what you really want to be doing. Okay, so what would you study or do with your time if the only thing that matters is that you enjoy it? What would you choose to do if you knew you wouldn't fail? So in other words, if you could remove many barriers that we come up with, you know, I would say that for most people, we have real barriers to choosing a major or to deciding what to do with our time. So time, money, access, these are all real factors that can enable or preclude us from doing something. But for this reflection, I want you to ignore those things and just try to get to the heart of what's real for you. What do you want to be doing with your time? If you could do anything and didn't have to worry about it not working out, what would that be? So I often, so go ahead and, sorry, I was going to tell a story, but I'll refrain from that. Go ahead and make note of this question if you can't answer it right now. Okay. Let's just do that. Let's just do this through chat. Actually, if someone wants to go ahead and share with me how you would answer that reflection question, that would be cool. All right, photography and travel. Okay, someone shared photography and travel. Yeah, I love it. Artistic pursuits. Oftentimes people don't think they can do, oftentimes people kind of eliminate artistic type pursuits and something like travel, which sound like, how could that be a career? So I like those ideas because I think they're kind of brave. Being a painter and a stylist. Okay, we got a lot of artistic people today. That's close to my heart. I'm a musician, so I'm into the art side. There's a big concept in career exploration that is true, and a lot of people ignore this or don't think of it, which is unplanned events or happenstance, randomly occurring things that we can't plan for, chaos. Oftentimes, these events determine our ultimate career direction. So you can see the statistic here on the slide. 70% of graduates say their careers were significantly influenced by unplanned events. So how do you harness this? How do you use it? It's a mindset, really. Again, give yourself permission to explore and let things happen to you. Take risks. Those ideas I was giving for being active, getting involved, that will give you the type of information that really helps guide you in major and career exploration. Again, it's not just the test. It's not just figuring out your interests and values by sitting down and writing them one day or taking a test. It's kind of living through them. That to me is crucial. So be aware that accidents do happen a lot. Oh, what could I say? I know I can tell numerous stories of people I know who took a part-time job. Like I have a friend that took a part-time job in a motorcycle shop uh, parts department because he just liked bikes and cars. He did so well that they promoted him. Um, 15 years later, he is the CEO and marketing manager of an Italian motorcycle company. He didn't actually even complete college. So he was kind of following what was interesting to him, and his whole career path was based on trying, being open to opportunities. Is probably how I could sum that up. Um, I did mention this earlier, all the influences that come into how we make decisions. And decision making alone is there are many decision making models, and something I often talk with students about how they make decisions. Can't get into that in depth today, but just be aware that what are all the factors that go into career and major decisions. Usually for college students, big ones would be family and friends, what they see other people, what they see peers doing. A lot of times people will say, "Oh, my roommate, my roommate is in health and exercise science, and I've learned a lot about HES from that. I think I might want to do that." Very common. Um, I did previously mention, I guess your culture, your background, and how that can affect decisions. And here I say it again: individualistic versus collective. Oftentimes the locus of decision may not be on the individual. You may be highly influenced by duty to a larger group. So um, yeah, I think that's probably enough about this particular slide. Okay. Again, if I had to pull one thing out to remember, it really helps if you think about the normal way most people do this. It's not direct. It's not the A to B. It's the convoluted, squiggly, zigzaggy, however way. I'm guessing that Dr. V or almost anyone involved in this probably could give you an idea um, that maybe supports this idea that the career path is not necessarily linear. And it can be, and that's awesome too. I have several friends. I actually have 2 or 3 friends that work in the field of architecture. They decided on architecture early. Even in high school, they studied architecture and they work in the architectural field. So in some ways, it's a straight line. And also, I would point out that what they actually do in architecture is not what they originally intended. So even though it was kind of a straight line, not 100%. So I do want to say one closing thing. Really appreciate you all having me. Thanks, Dr. V, for putting this together. I think this is an amazing experience for the students. And I do feel like me trying to cram all this into 45 minutes really kind of not a possibility. So hopefully you just come away with an idea and some concepts and some things to maybe talk about in the breakout group. But I do think it would be fun if you took that question, the self-reflection question. If there were no barriers, what would you do? I think that really gets to the heart of who you are. And I would just say that, just remember that your answer can be anything. It doesn't have to be a career. I mean, it doesn't have to be something that you know is a career. It's really more about just who you are. Try to be really free in your answering and talking about that. Okay, so that would be my closing comment. So thank you again for having me. I appreciate it. And my email is jon.linn@colostate.edu. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
John, you were so gracious to come today. He is one of our key people at the Career Center, so we were lucky to have him today. If everybody could give him some snaps or some applause and thanking him for being here today, that would be great. Thanks, John.